Hello everyone, welcome to the LangFocus channel and my name is Paul. Today's topic is, how similar are French and Italian? Well, they're actually very similar. They share a lot of common vocabulary and the grammar is very similar, but in terms of phonology they are quite different. So in their spoken form they are generally not mutually intelligible. French and Italian are both Romance languages. They both developed out of the Vulgar Latin spoken throughout the Roman Empire, but French kind of stands out as different from other Romance languages. The historical land of Gaul is located inside modern-day France, and one theory is that when the Roman Empire conquered Gaul and tried to force the local population to speak Latin, they spoke it using Gaulish speech sounds, and that has affected the phonology, the pronunciation of French until this day. Gaulish was a Celtic language, so that means that there is some Celtic influence in the French language, specifically in phonology. In any case, French and Italian are very closely related. Let's have a look at just how close they are. Vocabulary. Italian and French are very similar in terms of vocabulary. The lexical similarity of the two languages is 89%. That means that 89% of the words used have equivalents or cognates in the other language. That doesn't mean the words are exactly the same, but they are clearly related. Some obvious examples: bonjour, buongiorno, intéressant, interessante, manger, mangiare. And there are some less obvious cognates too. Hôpital, ospedale, heure, ora. A quelle heure? A che ora? Chercher, cercare. I think the figure of 89% is probably true if we include formal literary vocabulary, but in daily conversation it seems to be a little lower. Let's look at these examples. Metti qui la tua valigia e vieni con me in cucina. Ti preparo un café. Mets ici ta valise et viens avec moi dans la cuisine. Je te prépare un café. So here you can see that most of the words have an equivalent, except for the words that are in red. Those ones are different. Like the word for here, in Italian it's qui, and in French it's ici. And the word for with, in Italian it's con, and in French it's avec. The word for in Italian it's in, and in French it's dans. Aside from those words, the other words are all basically equivalent, except for a couple of definite articles which are used differently. I recommend that you pause the video now and look at the two sentences along with an English breakdown and see what you notice about the equivalents. Here are another couple examples. E non dimenticate di entrare in un negozio di ceramiche, et n'oubliez pas d'entrer dans un magasin de céramique. So again, these sentences are quite similar, but a few of the words are different. Dimenticate, that means forget in Italian, and oublier means forget in French. And again, we see the different words for in, the Italian word in and the French word dans. And we see different words for store, the Italian word negozio and the French word magasin. So again, why don't you pause the video and have a look at the two sentences and see what you can learn by comparing them. So you can see that in a typical sentence, the majority of vocabulary used is similar to the vocabulary used in the other language, but not all of it. Grammar. In French and Italian, the word order and the sentence structure are generally very similar. Here's a simple sentence to show similar word order. This sentence means I have a newspaper for the trip. Io ho un giornale per il viaggio. J'ai un journal pour le voyage. And you can see that these sentences are word for word translatable. But there are also some grammatical differences too. In French, subject pronouns are consistently used. But in Italian, subject pronouns generally aren't used except for emphasis. So in French, je parle anglais. In Italian, io parlo inglese. But io is not usually said, so it's just parlo inglese. And there's another difference in pronouns. In French, the second person formal and plural pronoun is vous. In Italian, the third person pronoun lei is used for the second person formal. So in French, we'd have vous parlez trop lentement. But in Italian, lei parla troppo lentamente. So the Italian sentence is like, she speaks too slowly. But it should be clear from the context that you are saying you and not she, because you're talking to someone directly. Also in Italian, direct object pronouns are also normally attached to the end of a verb when it's in the infinitive form. In French, we'd have je veux l'acheter. But in Italian, we'd have io voglio comprarlo. Negation is also a little different in the two languages. In French, we'd say je ne parle pas anglais, with ne and pas to show negation. But in Italian, we'd say io non parlo inglese. So in French, we have ne and pas, but in Italian, there's no equivalent of pas. Those are some little differences, but other major things like the verb tenses are basically the same. French and Italian share the same 14 verb tenses. Of course, they're not conjugated exactly the same, but the tenses function in the same way. For example, let's look at how the past tense is formed. In French, tu as mangé quelque chose. In Italian, tu hai mangiato qualcosa. This means you ate something, spoken to one person informally. The verb consists of two parts. First, the second person singular form of the word for have, and second, the past participle. Obviously, the forms are different, but the way you use them together to create the past tense is the same. And just as a quick side note, notice how to say something in the two languages. Quelque chose versus qualcosa. French and Italian grammar is very similar, just like the vocabulary is largely similar. Pronunciation. The biggest difference between French and Italian, and the one that prevents mutual intelligibility the most, is pronunciation. Italian pronunciation is mostly phonetic and mirrors the written words exactly. French words are pronounced differently from the way they're written, and you have to keep some phonetic rules in mind when pronouncing words. Most Italian words end in a vowel, which makes it easy to pronounce the end of the word. In French, there are many consonants that are usually silent at the end of a word. For example, this sentence meaning the weather is cold. In Italian, fa freddo. In French, il fait froid. Notice that the D sound at the end of froid is silent. Another example is the phrase for white wine. In Italian, vino bianco. In French, vin blanc. Here, the final C is silent, so the last sound we hear is the nasal sound represented by N. Vin also ends in a nasal sound. The N is not pronounced as a consonant here. Instead, it nasalizes the preceding vowel. So rather than vin blanc, it's vin blanc. There are also some other sounds that are quite different in French. For example, the French R. It's not the same as the rolled R that you would find in Italian. In Italian, you produce the R by flapping the tip of your tongue against the roof of your mouth behind your teeth. But the French R is a guttural R that's produced at the back of your mouth. In Italian, partire. In French, partir. So those final silent consonants, as well as the nasal sounds and the French R sound, those are some differences with Italian, but they're also some of the things that learners find challenging about French pronunciation. Let's finish by just breaking down a couple more sentences and seeing what similarities and differences we notice. Here's a sentence meaning, what are your favorite dishes? In Italian, quali sono I vostri piatti preferiti? In French, quels sont vos plats préférés? So word by word, the sentence is, what are your, plural, dishes, plural, preferred? Quali and quel are equivalents, but notice that the plural ending is different. In Italian, it's often I or e, but in French, it's a silent S. Sono and son are equivalent, but notice that sono ends in a vowel, while son ends in a nasal sound and a silent T. I vostri and vo are equivalent, but in Italian, the definite article is normally used with a possessive pronoun like vostri, while in French, there's no definite article. Piatti and plat are equivalent, but notice the different plural endings, and notice that words with I in Italian often have an L in French. We've seen another example of that, bianco in Italian and blanc in French. Preferiti and préféré are obvious equivalents, just with different accent markings and a different ending. Now here's one more pair of sentences, but this time I want you to have a look at them and notice the similarities and differences without me breaking it down for you. In Italian, I nostri amici finiscono di pranzare. In French, nos amis finissent de déjeuner. So I hope this video has made it clear just how similar French and Italian really are. The speaker of one of them can probably learn the other quite easily. And in writing, the level of mutual intelligibility is quite high. But because the cognate words are all a little bit different, and because the pronunciation of the two languages is so different, the two languages are not mutually intelligible in their spoken form. But as a learner of Italian, my previous knowledge of French makes a lot of things in Italian instantly clear to me. So the question of the day, for speakers of French and Italian, how similar do you consider the two languages to be? And to learners of French and Italian, does your knowledge of one of those languages help you make any sense of the other, or help you understand the other? Share your experiences in the comments down below. Be sure to follow LangFocus on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And again, thank you to all of my Patreon supporters for continuing to make this channel possible. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.